Today, I want to talk about how to teach pronunciation to groups of students as opposed to private one-on-one sessions. I know many of you out there are speech pathologists like me who usually work on pronunciation and accent training in private sessions, but there are also ESL teachers and ELL teachers who are teaching to a class, and actors, some acting coaches and voice coaches who are teaching accents and dialects to groups or classes. So it's a little bit different when working with a group as opposed to a private session. So I just wanted to give you some tips on how to teach pronunciation, accents, dialects effectively to more than one student. Now, personally, I prefer private sessions. It's just easier on us as the instructors to work with one student. It's a little more challenging to work with a group, but there are some big advantages to working with groups of people, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. So if possible, I really like to limit a group to no more than 4 to 6 students. Now, if you're working in a classroom or teaching a class, I know that may not be possible, but ideally 4 to 6 would be the max. If you're going to work with more than that, get ready, because it can be a little exhausting. As the teacher, you're going to need to correct everyone, and you're going to have to be really aware, and really your ears are going to have to be listening to every little mistake so that you can make the correction for each student. So it's a little bit exhausting to do it. It can be done. Just be ready for it. Now, let's talk about some of the advantages of working with a group as opposed to private sessions. There are some benefits to group work. The first one is more social interaction and support between students. So when a person is in a private session, they're doing all the work, they're getting a ton of critiques, a lot of critiques and a lot of feedback, which can feel overwhelming. And it can also be a little frustrating when you're being constantly corrected. But when you're in a classroom, there are others feeling your pain. They're doing it right along with you. So there's a sense of a social connection, a community, and the students really tend to support each other, not take themselves so seriously. And for this reason, they tend to improve really quickly. So that's one of the benefits. Another benefit is cost. Group sessions are more cost effective for your students, and they're more lucrative for you because you'll be charging less per student to work with each student in a group, but that can add up to be more than your regular private session rate. So at the end of the day, working with a group, you can earn more hourly than you would with just working with a private student one-on-one, right? So groups can be more lucrative for you. Corporations, a lot of corporations actually prefer groups. They really want to, they're impressed when you come to them with the offer of a group, because they want to get the most for their money too. If you're working with, if there are several employees in a company that are looking to improve their communication skills, if you come to the corporation or the company with a plan to work with a group, they can all work together. They can schedule it into their busy days. Some companies really prefer that and really like that. So that's another advantage. If you're comfortable working with groups, you can be really attractive, or your services can be really attractive for corporate work. And that's a great field to get into if it's something that you like to do. When students are in a group, they actually become better at picking out mistakes because they get more ear training. And this is weird because I hear this in my own speech. I will hear little mistakes and little dialect things popping up when I listen to myself in a recording like this one. I won't always hear myself. I do hear these things in real life sometimes, but often I'll hear things in a recording that I don't hear in real life. And I think a lot of us are like that. We'll hear mistakes in other people that we don't hear in ourselves. So in a group setting, when you're all working on the same goal and students are listening to other students, they'll hear mistakes in those other students that maybe they wouldn't have picked up on in their own speech. But at the end of the day, it makes them better at self-correction because their ear is being trained to pronounce or use features of the goal accent. So hopefully that makes sense. But in a group setting, students tend to be better listeners and be able to critique and correct the goal accent a little better than they do in private sessions. So again, you'll see more improvement, sometimes more quickly. So just a couple tips for working with larger groups. Don't worry about doing any type of assessment. It's really difficult to assess more than one person. When you go in, if you're not sure what to expect based on the native language, there are some goals that and I'm assuming we're talking about working, well, in this particular instance, I'm talking about working with non-native speakers who want to learn a more general American pronunciation or speech. But when you work with non-native speakers, there are goals and features of American English that everyone needs to work on. I always work on TH. I always work on rhythm. I always work on intonation. Everyone has to work on these goals. There are 12 of them that I teach in my program, my 12-week lesson plan, that almost everyone has to work on. So when you go in, don't feel like you have to individualize for each student. Get a group lesson plan that covers the sounds that almost everyone has to work on. TH will always be a goal, rhythm, intonation, the vowel ah is also one that most non-natives have to work on. So just to get you started, I would definitely cover those. Also, make sure you reassure students in your program, as I stumble over my words, that regardless of, there can be different native languages or different native accents in the group, the work is still effective as long as the goal accent is the same. Right? So it doesn't matter if you're working with a speaker of Japanese and a speaker of Spanish and a speaker of Italian and a speaker of Russian. They can all work together if the ultimate goal is to learn general American speech or general American pronunciation or that accent. I would never teach different goal accents or pronunciations. So I wouldn't teach Australian, British, and an Irish accent all in the same class as the goal. But as long as the goal is the same, it doesn't matter what the native language or native accent is, it will still be effective. And a lot of times I think we need to let our students know that. They worry that because they're working with, and they're in the same group with someone who speaks a different language, that it won't be as effective, and it will. Okay, because again, there are these common goals and features that most native speakers need to work on. Yeah, immediate self-correction. I do have notes here, just little notes to help keep me on track. Immediate self-correction is what creates permanent change. This is the foundation of speech training. So this is something that is very easy to do, immediately self-correct, or to immediately correct our students and have them learn to correct themselves. That's very easy to do in a private session. In a group, it's not as easy. So you have to really be sure that you're providing this for each student. So a couple of ideas. Have them work together on practice sheets. Pair up some students, have them practice together using speech training practice sheets. Have them correct each other. Again, it really helps to build the ear training so that as they correct others, they're really learning to correct themselves. And sometimes they'll improve more quickly than students in private sessions. Work in pairs, give them a topic, have them talk and correct each other in conversation. Correction in spontaneous conversation is really important. So they need to get some practice, some conversational practice as well, if you want to hear permanent change. As the instructor, it's not always easy, but try to give each student just a little bit of personal attention and feedback in the class. If it's a larger group, it can be difficult, but really try to give a little bit of attention to each student, a few corrections, so that they do get that personalized attention that they need. And that's it. One final thought before I wrap this up. In a group setting, the challenge is really on you, the instructor, to get the conversations going, to give everyone a chance to speak, to make sure everyone gets a little bit of personal feedback and correction, and basically to help your students learn to correct themselves in real conversation. Because honestly, That's what speech training is all about. That's what creates the permanent change, the permanent improvement, and all the things that we want to see happen with our students. So just some thoughts on working with groups. I hope you enjoyed this, found this useful, and I will see you again in another lesson.